Alrighty. If you want to open up your Bibles to Ecclesiastes, and before you look at the board tonight, I would like for you, if you're writing notes, to write the title of the lesson tonight before you look at the board, and then I want to see how you spell it before we leave tonight. Just curious to see how that's going to work out. I'm excited for Ecclesiastes. I like this book a lot. And this is kind of a joke, but even though it's a joke, there's a lot of truth to it. Shane Scott said one time something about Ecclesiastes that, well, it was funny at the time that he said it, and then you go through life a little bit, and it's like, wow, he was being funny, but that's kind of true. He said, if you're depressed, then Ecclesiastes will make you not depressed anymore. If you're not depressed, then Ecclesiastes will make you that way. And so, depending on where you are, you know, the message is an interesting one. One of the things about Ecclesiastes that's really difficult is as you read through the book, right about the time you think you get the message figured out, and you say, this is what he's talking about, he'll throw you a curveball and go the totally opposite direction from what he's been saying. And so that's one fun thing about the book, is just trying to read it and say, what's the message, and pin that down. It's kind of difficult, but also fun. There's a lot of great stuff in this book. I'll try and summarize a few things tonight, but it's not really that long. And probably if you went home tonight, it wouldn't take you that long to just read Ecclesiastes all the way through. And I'm almost certain that you would be glad that you did. So, number one, who wrote Ecclesiastes? There is no author named. And traditionally, this is one of the words that you will see as the author of Ecclesiastes. It's a Hebrew word. I did not take the time to look through other versions of the Bible on this. I wish that I had now at this point. Sometimes in, let's see, Ed, in Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 1, does your version say Koheleth, or does it say the preacher or the teacher? Preacher. The preacher, yeah. Well, the Hebrew word is Koheleth, and that would be the thing that people say. Who wrote Ecclesiastes? Almost across the board, the standard answer will be Koheleth, which is, you're like, I don't know what that word means. That's because you probably don't speak Hebrew. That's fine. It's a Hebrew word. But the word means the preacher, or some versions say the teacher. And so you'll see that. Chapter 1 and verse 1, the words of the preacher. In verse 2, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, and all the way through the verses that I've listed on the board up here. So the preacher is the speaker or the author of this book. So here's something. Let's see if anybody can do something really, really impressive. So I've mentioned this several times throughout this study. There's lots of information that comes from the Septuagint. Do you remember the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible? So the Septuagint is the Greek Bible that Jesus and his apostles would have had available to them. And I realize that probably nobody here speaks or reads Greek, but let's try something real quick. What do you think is the Greek word that translates the Hebrew word Koheleth? The Greek word is Ecclesiastes. That's where the title of the book comes from. So we're going to be talking about Ecclesiastes, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Koheleth, because the book is written by the preacher, or is supposedly these words of the preacher. I don't have any trouble saying that the preacher is Solomon. And these are probably some good things to write, maybe just next to the top margin of your Bible so you can see it. In verse 1 of chapter 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Well, which one of the sons of David was king in Jerusalem? He's not specifically named, but this is one of those things that should not be hard for people to at least get to. In chapter 1, in verse 12, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. So here is, I, Koheleth, have been king in Israel, in Jerusalem. Chapter 1 and verse 16, also, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And so, yes, this is Solomon. He is the son of David who is king in Jerusalem, but also he is intimately connected with wisdom and knowledge. We talked about that last week with Proverbs and how Solomon specifically said, when God said, I'll give you anything, what do you want me to give you? And Solomon said, wisdom. And God said, that is the right answer. And so God gave him wisdom. And that's just a reflection of this. But this is a little different from Proverbs. It's not exactly the same thing. Okay, so what is the message of Ecclesiastes? You see it right here at the very start, chapter 1 and verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Some versions try to get the idea across here with vanity of vanities. The NIV says meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Your NET says futile, futile, laments the teacher. Absolutely futile. Everything is futile. And I think that it's at least worth trying to pin down what's going on with this word, because look at the very end. I hope that you have a marker here in Ecclesiastes so you can get to the first really fast. But go to the very end of Ecclesiastes. In chapter 12 and verse 8, this is also how the book ends. So these are bookends. It starts with vanity of vanities, everything is vanity. And then chapter 12 and verse 8 says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. So those bookends are indicators to us that this book is something about vanity of vanities, all is vanity, whatever that means. Here's something for you. The word vanity that's used is literally the word vapor. So imagine fog. You wake up in the morning and there's fog in the air, and it's a really foggy day, and here's fog, and it's all around you, and it's right in front of you. And you reach out and you try and grab it, and good luck. You're not grabbing fog. You're not grabbing vapor. It's there, but it's not there. There's nothing you can do with it. And so this idea of vapor, everything is vapor. That's really the word that's used here, but what are we trying to do? Like ephemeral, vain, worthless, inconsequential. This is the way that I'm going to be approaching the book, especially after we talk some about the meaning of the book and some of the things that are going on here. I think that what he's asking himself is, what is the point? What is the point of anything? What is the point of everything? And we're going to live our lives, and we're going to do the things that we do, but to what end? Like, I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to collect all of this money and all of this stuff in my life, and then I'm going to die. And to what end? Like, to what end has all of this been for? For what? What's the point of this? And I think that it's not, I think the next question down here, he's asking these questions. What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be accomplishing? What is it all about? There's so much of that that just fills this book that I think it's going to be what we're after. Let's just start here. Let's read a little bit of this. Ecclesiastes 1, starting in verse 2. it says, vanity of vanity, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What is the point? What am I trying to, what end am I doing this thing? Verse 3. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, where they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to come among those who come after. And, you know, this is an illustration that often pops up in a conversation like this. If Mary Watson were here tonight, she would completely ruin this illustration, because she would have answers as far back as I could possibly go. But if I say, who are your grandparents? I hope that you would know who your grandparents are. And then I say, who are your great-grandparents? And then who are your great-great-grandparents? And about this time you're like, well, I know their names, and I would say, tell me something about them. They're your own family. Tell me something about your great-great-grandparents. And you're like, well, I don't really know very much about my great-great-grandparents. But their life was just like our life. Like they lived just like we lived, did all the stuff that we did, and they're gone, and we and their own family don't even know anything about them. It just goes around and around and around. And go back farther than that, and there's nothing. Unless you're Mary Watson, and she can go all the way back to like Middle Ages England and tell you everything about all of those people. Her ancestors are really happy. This is just totally unrelated. Mary Watson is the one who found my dad's biological family that we got connected up with not long ago, and she gets the credit for that. She's really good at that stuff. Anyway, chapter 2 and verse 1. Look at this. Let's do 12. I want to read a little bit of this. Chapter 1 and verse 12. Okay, so what's the point of everything? And here's the first thing he says. And this is Solomon, remember, so this makes some sense. He says, okay, I'm the wisest guy that ever has been. I'm going to set my heart to know. I want to know things. I want to know wisdom. I want to know truth. And so verse 12. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. And I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, and a striving after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but striving after the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Think about that. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and the more you know, the more you appreciate, boy, there's a lot of bad out there. That's what his thing is, that whoever increases knowledge increases sorrow. And so chapter 2 and verse 1, we're going to change direction. This is Solomon, and we know this about Solomon's life and Solomon's story. He said, okay, I'm going to seek wisdom. And he's like, I asked the question, what's this all about? What is the purpose of life? I sought wisdom and I didn't get there. There's still something lacking. So now what he's going to do is he's going to search after pleasure. Maybe if I just live a good and pleasurable hedonistic life, I'm going to fill myself up with all things pleasure. Chapter 2 and verse 1. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest and of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had all great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. I think that the best illustration for me of the pleasure aspect is like the super rich and celebrity people in Hollywood. You look at these people and you consider from a money aspect. Like, these people are living with numbers that I can't even comprehend. And they're living with stuff and cars and celebrity and these are the people who have it all. And how many of them are just completely broken? Like, you can look at them and you can say, you have an empty life. And maybe you can't look at him and know that, but then something like Robin Williams comes down the pike. Like, here is a guy who looks like he's enjoying life, has everything, and it turns out he doesn't. And I think that's the point of what Solomon's saying here. I tried to live my life and to seek out what is the point of all of this and what am I supposed to be doing? And he got to the end of all of it and he said, that's not it. I haven't found it yet. And so that really is going to be one of the things that is going to be your challenge as you read through this book, is to say, what is he talking about? Where does he find the meaning and the purpose of life in all things? I want to do one thing with you tonight. We'll only do this one thing. There's 4 passages and related things that go with it. But let's do this. Look at the last couple of verses of Ecclesiastes. Ryan read this for us as we got started. I think that we're really fortunate to have these last 2 verses because he tells us, he specifically tells us what we're supposed to be doing at the end of everything. But there's some words that I want to look at here. It says, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. The thing that I want us to really drill down and focus on in this lesson is that thing. He says, this is the whole duty of man. Literally what that is this is all the man. This is what I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that 2 words, the whole duty of man, all the man, that 2 words, they're used 4 times in the book. And that, I think, guides us through the meaning of Ecclesiastes, maybe as good as anything that we'll find. So let's look at those 4 times. There's 3 points, 4 times that this word is used in Ecclesiastes. Point number 1. There's 2 verses with point number 1. Ecclesiastes 3, starting in verse 9. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart. Yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceived that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that the whole duty of man, there's our 2 words, all of man, also that all of man should eat, drink, and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. There's a second one that falls into this same category of thinking. It's Ecclesiastes 5 and verses 18 through 20. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat, drink, and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. The whole duty of man, there's our words, all of man also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. And so those two passages talk about basically the same thing. And that is, if we're going to live this life and work and toil and do all of the things that we do in this life, you had just as well enjoy it. And he calls it twice. He says, this is the gift of God. The word is not specifically used here, but you can see the same concept in chapter 2 in verses 24 through 26. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, God, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and striving after the wind. And so, I'll read this section because I don't want to mess it up. You may not be able to answer all the questions about what is the point or what is the meaning of life from the book of Ecclesiastes. But God has given us that life, and we're all better off to enjoy it while we can. That's, I think, point number 1 of Ecclesiastes. Or, if you don't like that, live and toil and be miserable. We're all going to have the same end, and if you choose to be miserable, all my best. But what Solomon is saying is, if we're all going to do it anyway, then you just as well enjoy it while we're here and what we have. Now, here's the reason why he says vanity of vanities, all is vanity, over and over again. Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and verses 1 and 2. This is point number 2 in this thing, where the whole duty of man is used. Point number 2 is, no matter what we do, we're all going to end up as dirt. And so Ecclesiastes 7 and verses 1 and 2. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for this is the end of the whole duty of man. There's our word. This is the end of all the man, and the living will lay it to heart. that's where the word is used. But let me just show you, there's all kinds of these death passages through Ecclesiastes. Let me just show you 3 of them. We'll go to chapter 2 and verse 14. I think these 3 will give you a good sense of what you can see in the book. Chapter 2 and verse 14. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. You see what he's saying? The wise person has his eyes open and he sees. And the fool is in darkness and he stumbles around and he does all of this stuff. But he says, here's the thing. The wise guy has his eyes open. The fool has his eyes shut, walks around stumbling into everything. But at the end of the road, they both die. The wise and the fool have exactly the same end. Chapter 2 and verse 15. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten, how the wise dies just like the fool. And so go back to the great-grandparent, great-great-grandparent, maybe the great-great-great-grandparent that was somebody in your family, maybe they were just the greatest thing, super wise, the greatest thing that the world ever knew. You still don't know who they are. They're still dead, just like every other dummy that ever lived. They have the same end. And so he's really questioning, he's working through, so what's the point of being the wise if we're all going to have the same end? Look at chapter 2 and verses 19 through 22. Let's see. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will be master of all for which I toil and use my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. If you want just a healthy dose of skepticism and pessimism, you're going to work your whole life and then leave everything to the government. Good job. To what end? And all of that. Chapter 4 and verse 2. And I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been born and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. So you're going to see, I've got a list here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 more of these death passages throughout Ecclesiastes. And this is the thing that we really, this is the part, if you're not depressed, you will be. This is the thing that, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here in all of this, but message number 1 of Ecclesiastes is, if we all have to live and toil and work, you just as well enjoy it. But number 2, the whole duty of man, all the man, still lives under this great umbrella of, even if you enjoy it, it's all for nothing in the end anyway. And so death has got to be, especially since that word is used here, death has got to be a major focus throughout this book and the ultimate futility of everything that we do. But the last time that the word is used is the thing that's should have the biggest guiding impact on our lives and what all of this means for us. Chapter 12 and verses 13 and 14. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. This is all of man. It's what he finishes with, verse 14. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing whether good or evil. There's another one of these if you want to turn to chapter 8 and verse 10. Chapter 8 and verses 10 through 13. Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy place and were praised in the city where they had done such things. So he says, here's the wicked guy living a wicked life. And in the life that he lives wickedly, people praise him for it. Like he's doing all right. But he still dies and he's still buried. This also is vanity. Verse 11. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Boy, there's a really good lesson about life right there. But the idea is we look around and we see the world and everybody's doing whatever they want to be doing and they seem to be doing just fine. And everybody else in the world says, hey, why not do that? They're having a good time. He says, because their evil is not executed speedily, then we look at it and think, maybe I can get away with it. Verse 12, though a sinner does evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God. And so the final point, I think, if you want to put these three things together, these 4 times the word is used in Ecclesiastes, if we're going to live, we just as well enjoy it. But also remember that it's all going to be for nothing anyway. But that, if we're going to live, we just as well enjoy it, is governed by the last one, which is fear God and keep his commandments, because you might enjoy it here and now, but you're not going to enjoy it on the other side. We will answer for ourselves at some point. That's the last thing he says. God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. And so, yeah, we're going to live and have a good time, but have a good time, especially in the Bible. When I hear the words eat, drink, and be merry, that doesn't have a positive ring to me because of the way that Jesus talked about it. But here is the author, Solomon, saying in Ecclesiastes, this is what we do, eat, drink, and be merry. But the book ends with but you better make sure that your eating and drinking and being merry is still governed by the fear of God, and that you're not going to end up digging yourself a hole after the other side of death where we have to answer for ourselves. And so here is my 1-sentence summary. It's a quote. It's a quote, but it's only 1 sentence. Fear God, live in your own sphere. I really wish that the author would have said stay in your own lane. That would have been a better quote. Fear God, live in your own sphere. Accept the fact that there is meaning even when you do not know what it is. Avoid extremes and enter fully into those limited joys that life can supply. I worked a lot with this quote and the 1-sentence summary, because when I was done with it, I said, no, this quote is not good enough for Ecclesiastes, because we really need to emphasize the obedience to God part. Like, yes, live your life, but live your life for God. And I worked through all this stuff. I had a whole separate paragraph. I had some other passages. And then I looked at the quote one more time, and I was like, oh, he already said that. Fear God. That's the first piece. And so here you go. This is Ecclesiastes. Fear God. Stay in your own lane. Accept the fact that there's meaning even when you do not know what it is. Avoid extremes. Enter fully into those limited joys that life can supply. I'll finish with one last thing. Also that came from Shane Scott. And this is a question. I don't say this as a statement. because I don't know the real answer to this. One of the problems that we have with Solomon is that he seems to have had a bad end, right? I mean, he started off strong. He was David's son. God was happy with him, gave him wisdom, riches. He built the temple. He united Israel. That was the golden age of the kingdom of God's people. He is the prototype for Jesus. He is the Son of God who would build God's house. And maybe it's in that pleasure section. And then everything just went downhill for Solomon. He turned away from God. The Bible tells us that it was his many wives who turned his heart away from the Lord. And he seems to have had a bad end. And one of the questions that I have about Solomon was, did he ever figure it out? There's no place in the Bible that answers that question for us. But Shane said this to me one time as he read through Ecclesiastes. He said, what if Ecclesiastes is Solomon's repentance? It would be a really good final statement of his life to say, I went down that road only to discover that it led to nowhere. And so here I am coming back at the end of all things with this realization. The whole duty of man is to fear God and keep his commandments, because we're all going to answer for ourselves in judgment. I don't know if that's right or not, but it's at least something worth thinking about. If you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, then the book of Ecclesiastes would be a really great thing for you to consider. You're living your life right now. Maybe you're happy with your life. Maybe you're not happy with your life. But the point of what we're supposed to be doing is serving God, completely devoted to him and to his things, because that is what's going to end well for all of us. If you're here tonight and you want to respond to this invitation, come forward and we'll help you with that.